Sometimes it's hard to have really important conversations about culture and about how minorities within communities of color are being perceived. And when you're an Asian woman, it's hard. It's hard to be transparent because we're not raised to have that level of openness. And so when Kaila Yu wrote her book, and she began it back during the pandemic, and specifically after that horrific spa shooting in Atlanta in 2021, Kaila Yu said, you know what, I'm going to write this memoir and I'm going to be honest about yellow fever, as it's called, and the fetishization of Asian women, the hypersexualization of Asian women. And this book is a fantastic, memoir of her own personal journey, but it talks about the history of the way that Asian women have been portrayed and why it's led to violence and sexualization of Asian women in ways that have been incredibly destructive. I really enjoyed speaking with Kaila, and I know you will too. Take a listen. Joining me now, I do have the privilege of being able to spend time with Kaila Yu. Kaila, it's good to see you.
Yeah, so good to see you.
So Kaila, I really was so excited to have this conversation with you. It's for those that know me, it's not really off the beaten path to have a conversation like this. One, because I always try to elevate and amplify AANHPI voices. I feel like we are sorely underrepresented in so many different areas, especially when it comes to the media. And I know that's something you and I can talk about. But I felt such an affinity for your book, Fetishized, A Reckoning with Yellow Fever, Feminism, and Beauty. And let me be clear, I haven't had the type of journey that you have had, but I most certainly have had to grapple with a lot of the themes and the issues that make up your book. But let's start with your book. I know you started writing it back in the pandemic, which was a few years ago during the lockdown. And I love the way it's structured in terms of kind of a series of smaller essays. But why was it so important to reduce everything about your journey and your life into a book, especially this day and age where a lot of people just kind of just want to maybe put it out in just some digital content?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have never intended to write a memoir at any stage in my life, but and I've never experienced, I've experienced microaggressions, but never straight out blatant racism, I would say. Well, actually I have. In retrospect, in writing the book, I'm like, I have experienced a lot, but I didn't clock it. But it was just during the pandemic when the Stop Asian Hate was happening. There was such in your face racism, disturbing viral videos of our elders getting beat into the ground. And then so I started talking about those issues on my TikTok or social media. And then the Atlanta spa shootings happened. And then, all Asian women knew what it was as soon as we heard it. But then the media said it wasn't, kind of gaslit us into saying it wasn't sexually or racially motivated. And I wrote this piece for Newsweek, kind of reckoning with my participation in furthering objectifying Asian women when I was in my 20s, and how that might have contributed to the Asian fetish. And then that article kind of sparked discussion and then ultimately inspired a book. And then I discovered there's been no first person book written on the fetishization of Asian women. Books have touched on it, but not completely focused on the issue. And we've all experienced it.
And your book is not only written in the first person, it is a recollection of your personal journey. But obviously the reason why I would say we haven't seen a book like this, Kaila, is because we're not raised to put our shit out there.
Yes, yeah.
We are raised culturally to just kind of take it and then just quietly process it, internalize it, have it exhibit it ways that are incredibly not productive and kind of self-destructive sometimes. And I think that's the reason why you don't get the first person narrative about how being fetishized has impacted you as an Asian woman until you actually were the pioneer to write this book.
Yeah, I always say my poor parents. My parents are so amazing, but parents, my parents have been nothing but supportive, but most parents don't want this out there, of these experiences. And I didn't frankly ask for their permission because I've just been a rebellious person, but they've been very supportive along the way. And I'm lucky for that.
So for people that are tuning in, they may look at you and say, wow, she looks so familiar. And for those of you that are tuning in and watching, Kaila, you've been an import model. We'll get into that in a second, an actress, Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. You're a journalist, you're a writer. You also do have a pretty large social media presence, especially right now. When I saw import model, I kind of like pumped the brakes and I had to ask myself, what the hell is an import model? So what is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a term only known in the Asian American community and probably from like the early 2000s. But all it is basically like a car model, but specifically for JDMs, which are import cars, like Japanese domestic market cars.
And Kaila, what I read something when I was preparing for you and I have this conversation in addition to reading your book, and you pretty much said, and I can totally understand where you're coming from, that for the longest of times your kind of sense of identity was ill-defined, if almost non-existent, because partially the way that you were raised in your family in Southern California and being Taiwanese, and having the pressures of being Taiwanese and American, right? Living here in the US, but also kind of not being seen until you leaned into this idea that if you were embodying the hypersexualized Asian female role, that it would bring attention, sometimes unwarranted or unwanted, but that it kind of changed it on its head in terms of you feeling seen.
Absolutely. I feel like, growing up in high school, I was very invisible, but like to set the background, this was also in the time of like third wave feminism, where like the whole culture was thinking, oh, women are empowered by their sexuality. So then I'm like feeling like I'm invisible. And then I'm seeing Paris Hilton with her sex tape and Pamela Anderson with their sex tape. Mind you, these were like their victims and like, but whatever, women at that time were leaning into their sexuality and being really rewarded for it. And I was your quote unquote model minority stereotype girl growing up. But when I started changing and doing little like tweaks that were a little bit sexier, I was instantly rewarded for that.
And lest anybody think differently, you are a college graduate with an economics degree from UCLA. So it's not like you went straight from high school and decided you were going to venture out into just modeling or doing some other work, but it was not an easy journey for you. Was it traumatic to have to write this book and relive a lot of these experiences?
Yeah, I mean, oh, by the way, I think I said I was an economics degree starting, but I ended up graduating with an Asian American studies degree.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing.
But it's funny because I started writing the book years ago, right? So when they told me that the book was going to be published like 2.5 years from then, I was like, this has never happened. Like a million things could happen before your editor could leave and it could get shelved. So when I was writing all these traumatic things, I didn't think it would ever be, it was so long that anyone was going to read them that I didn't have that fear of being like exposed or whatever. But it was actually the most healing experience of my life to write these experiences because like I have a sexual assault that I speak about in the book that I did not tell anyone about for decades. And when I started telling other women about it, they were like, that's assault. When I started telling therapists about it, and then my editor, Amy Lee, who I always talk about because she's amazing, is Asian American. And she was there to process every single experience and support me through it. And she hadn't been through the exact same experiences, but she'd been through a lot of like what you mentioned, just the general grappling with issues all Asian women have to deal with. So it was the best thing for like my trauma journey.
You're incredibly blunt in your book about yellow fever. And the beginning of your book actually starts with two definitions. The first one is what an Asia-phile is, per the Urban Dictionary, which, by the way, I love the Urban Dictionary. Asia-phile defined as the term that applies to a non-Asian person, particularly a white man who has yellow fever, thinks all Asian chicks are hot, usually can't tell the difference between a homely and a cute one just as long as she's Asian. Lucy Liu is Asia-phile's favorite, is an example. And then you go on to use a Merriam-Webster definition for the word fetish, the definition being an object of irrational reverence or obsessive devotion. You understood that there was commercial success from kind of exploiting that in a way that kind of helped you again, maybe even financially, to be able to kind of set your own terms to have financial independence. But you also had to buy in to that fetish, yellow fever energy to be able to do that. How did you grapple with that? Because you want to have the independence to do what you want to do, but you understand that part of it has to be, again, to play into and almost exploit that kind of aspect of things.
To like set the scene, I never even thought to I never thought about my role in perpetuating the fetish until the pandemic. So
Mm.
before then, I hadn't really thought critically about it. And mind you, I speak about this in my books. I was doing a lot of drugs and alcohol during this time. So I definitely wasn't thinking very clearly or analyzing my decisions. And back then, I didn't see that the Asian fetish led to violence, which I kind of detail how it is born from colonialism and rape and leads to violence enough of the time for us to be concerned about. But back when I was in my 20s, I just thought these guys who have an Asian fetish, they're creepy and weird, but I didn't think it was that harmful.
Mm.
Which is, ignorant, certainly. But yeah, I just didn't realize how harmful it was to even just play into it at the time.
And I love, though, that you don't kind of just keep it in the lane of these are my personal experiences. You also explore historically, as you just mentioned a minute ago, how the colonialization, how wars have perpetrated and perpetuated this kind of fetishization of Asian women. We know about the comfort women in Korea, Japan, and other countries, right? We know about them, or maybe people don't know. So how important was it for you to also weave into your book just historical references to the fact that this is not some modern day kind of innovative idea?
Absolutely, because I was an Asian American Studies major. And while I was researching this book, I learned things I had no idea about. So if they're not even teaching this in Asian American Studies, they're not teaching it anywhere. So I thought this information was so important to include because people are completely unaware of the historical pieces that make up this current fetish. There was a shocking statistic about when the Americans entered Japan after Japan fell in World War II. And the Japanese had to set up a comfort station specifically for the Americans to prevent the Americans from raping local women. And then reports back from the women who worked there said that it was atrocious, the kind of sex that the soldiers required of the women. They treated them like animals. And then the station had to be shut down due to rampant STDs. And then I don't know the exact statistic, but say once that comfort station shut down, the local rapes went from something like 80 rapes a day to 500 rapes a day or some incredible statistic. So it's just shocking. American soldiers are supposed to be heroes, but to hear that they're not only perpetuating this violence on local women, but bringing these ideas of women who were victims of their actions, bringing back that hypersexual idea back to America.
And that kind of that helps us also understand then that the depictions of Asian women in media, films, TVs, movies, and otherwise, it hasn't been helped by how Hollywood, for example, has depicted Asian women. We're either submissive, we're mail order brides, we are comfort women, we're prostitutes in the Vietnam War, for example, right? We are fungible, interchangeable. We all look the same, right? It's kind of a joke, but not really, because it's the reality. It's most people can't tell the difference between a Korean and a Chinese and a Japanese and a Vietnamese woman. And this idea that because we are fungible and almost faceless in some way, that it's okay to kind of have the yellow fever or be able to sexually abuse or harm Asian women because we've been dehumanized in many ways that we've been depicted by entertainment in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, I dedicated an entire chapter to Memoirs of a Geisha because that book was so influential to me growing up. I think the only book before that I had read about Asian women in English was The Joy Luck Club, which I also
Yeah,
loved.
sure,
But
sure.
Memoirs of Geisha was like a glamorized view of Asian women basically fighting, to the death for the attention of these much older men. Um, and what's really funny when I start talking about that book is nobody realizes it was written by a white man. Like, even though his name's right there on the cover, just the way it's written and the way it's presented, it's like a memoir of this young woman, right? So, I think that book was a huge, huge bestseller and the movie was huge. And that definitely influenced, and further perpetuated this idea of Asian women as servile to men.
I feel like at the same time, when we understand, and in your instance, kind of again, lean into your Asianness to try to take advantage of it in a way that's self preserving and also beneficial, right? You're navigating the best that you can do. I also read that you wanted to do the plastic surgery to look more westernized. And let me tell you something, I got a lot of pressure growing up about getting the double eyelid surgery done, to get the crease put in, to get surgery done on my nose to build up my bridge. Like these ideas of becoming pretty because you're not unless you meet the Western standard. And yet, ironically, a couple things. One, the yellow fever standard is the Asian standard, right? For white guys. But number two, I'm noticing this huge boon in K-pop, Korean beauty, etc. And even the men in Korea are doing the plastic surgery
Oh,
to look
yeah.
more westernized. It's wild, right?
It's crazy because I haven't been to South Korea in like 20 years, but even back then when I went, everybody was so beautiful, but very similar. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, but very, very beautiful. And like, but I do think all the surgeons are doing the same thing. And I don't know if everybody realizes, because I talk about, I had the fold, but I got the double eyelid surgery to make my eyes bigger. And I don't think that everybody realizes that the surgery was popularized by this doctor named Ralph Millard, who was actually stationed in Korea and trying to make prostitutes and military wives look more attractive for white men or military soldiers.
I did
So,
not
and he
know.
wrote very derogatory things about Asian eyes in journals, like saying they're dull and passive and like need to be improved.
You wrote the following, and it kind of really stuck with me, Kaila. You said that the power you got from being visible was like doing cocaine. Very cheap, it doesn't last, and there are repercussions. You're now in your early 40s now? When you look back, I mean, a lot of it, I think, is this was your journey. I also believe that you are where you're supposed to be when you're there. I also think that's part of what led you to write this book, right? Which is an illuminating, incredibly thoughtful memoir about your life. Um, what would you tell your younger self? Because you've been through a lot, a sexual assault, all of this pressure to kind of look a different way, to be a different person, and yet it's inescapable. We're Asian. These are the things that we just cannot escape.
I would just tell her you are loved. Like, simply put, I did not feel loved, even though I was unconditionally loved by my parents. Like, that is very, very apparent. They gave up everything to have us have our best lives. But living in America, seeing the kind of demonstrative American love of like
Mhm.
hugs and I love you and whatever.
Totally different than an Asian family.
Yeah, it's a different display of love. And I didn't realize I was loved. And I just felt this like overwhelming lack of self-esteem that I searched for outside validation. So, I mean, if we could just teach our children self-love, all of us, I wish that was something that was in our curriculum because I would have made different choices.
So your book is obviously unique to you and your journey, but I feel like a lot of people could benefit from reading it. You wrote that you would really want men especially to be able to read your book. Why is that?
I mean, I think it's so important for us just to read different stories of different experiences. I've been getting feedback from a lot of men who have been reading the book and they're mind blown because they just don't realize quite what women deal with. Like they know on a surface level, but they don't really know. And I know there's like this kind of divide between some Asian men and Asian women. You know, there's like the men's rights Asians that harass Asian women for dating white men at all,
That's right.
which is unfair. And just for them to see the pressures that Asian women also deal with, you know, from all angles in their lives, we can all use so much more compassion in this day and age. So I think that's what reading the book could serve for
So
and have more compassion for women.
where can people get fetishized? Where can they get it?
Yeah, it's available everywhere. But I always say support your local bookstore. So if you have an indie bookstore that you love, go find it there.
Kaila Yu, thank you so much for taking this time. I am very proud of you. We don't know each other very well, but when I see a fellow Asian American woman having the bravery to put their lived experience out there, to be scrutinized publicly, it's not easy to be that transparent. And yet I'm a huge believer in authenticity, and that when you are honest and authentic about who you are, it resonates. And for me, your book most certainly did that. And I'm grateful that you took the time to share the why behind what you've done, because I'm excited to see what you've got next.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.